I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. Today I'm talking to Matt Flores, who lives in Tennessee. Matt has been a longtime friend and disciple who lived in Tucson for about 10 years during the startup of our church. Now he lives in Tennessee with his wife and 2 children. But I'm talking to Matt on kind of a different term. He's a strong disciple, but he's also a strong investor, and in particular with Bitcoin. Matt's been an inspiration to me and a source of wisdom over the years in the investment realm, and especially with what's been happening recently in markets. It made me think, I want to talk to Matt and get some advice about what's been happening with the threat of inflation and increasing inflation and really the turbulence in the markets. I'd like to talk to him, and especially as many ministers are thinking about retirement and heading into the future, what's the best course of action? What's a wise course of action? So I look forward to talking to Matt Flores. So all this and more on the Rob Skinner Podcast. Welcome back to the Rob Skinner Podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no-regrets life, make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Matt, welcome to the program.
Rob, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you and just catch up.
I know. I just wanted to say hi. You left this last fall, and it was a huge, huge hit to our church. I know you moved closer to your family, and so we'll probably cover that a little bit more. But why don't we start this way? How'd you become a Christian?
Yeah, I was in 2007. I grew up in Southern California and had a Christian family, and we would go to church, but it was kind of like whenever it was convenient. And so I grew up with a faith. Like, I believed in Jesus. I believed he died for my sins, but there was no life or convictions that backed it up. I was baptized as a baby. I was baptized again at 8 years old. And when they told me, like, you love Jesus, right? So let's baptize you. So again, it's like I had that faith, but there was no life to line up with it. And then it was my first year in college, and I just lived the sinful college life. Like, you name it, I did it. And I knew that there was something missing. I knew that God was real, and that the life that I was living was not the life that he called me to live and called me to be. And so I was kind of like in the pit, like looking for God, seeking God, praying to God, help me find you. And I remember a prayer where I was on my knees in tears, like asking God to find me, because I wasn't bold enough to like just look for a church and go. And so within the week, 2 disciples, Mon Kang and Jason Pearson, were just sharing their faith on campus. I was taking a summer school class at the local junior college, and the brothers weren't like, it wasn't some like evangelistic push, like, hey, let's, they just called each other and said, hey, let's go share our faith today. And first person they happened to meet was me. And, we were just chatting and talking about, like, it was the NBA finals. It was like LeBron James with the Cavs playing the Spurs back in 2007. And they said, hey, why don't you come out to a Bible discussion? And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like fun. Not even realizing, like, after I walked away, I realized, like, wow, this is exactly what I prayed for.
Wow.
Like, I prayed for God to find me, and here these guys, like, just, reaching out. And then, so the next day I went to the Bible devotional, and from there studied the Bible. And like I said, I was desperate for God. Like, I was rock bottom, and I studied the Bible in 6 days and got baptized, the next week. And so it was a quick turnaround. But like I said, I was just like so ready to find God.
You got baptized in a week?
Yes.
Wow. You were really open. Wow.
Yeah.
That's blow away that you were praying and God sent someone into your life within a week. And then a week later you're saved.
Yep.
I mean, that's like that's Bible stuff right there. That's like, Ethiopian eunuch style right there or something. That's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
They didn't have to work hard on me. God was already doing that well before.
You had a soft heart. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Okay, so where have you been since that time? That's 2007. Can you just kind of
Yep.
give a overview of where things have gone?
Yeah, so that was in 2007. I was in Orange County in the campus ministry. Loved it. We had a great campus ministry. A lot of the leaders in that group are like all over the U.S. at this point, doing great things for the kingdom. But yeah, I was there, served as an intern with the Orange County Church with the campus, and then went into the singles, and then moved to Tucson. I had a relationship with a sister that kind of drew me out here, and then it was the mission team that kept me out here because I was just, I came out here, I was checking it out as I was dating that sister, and I was like, wow, like this is right when Tucson was getting started in 2013, and you had things going, and I was like, this is awesome, I want to move here. And so God opened it up. I got a great job with a good company. I'm a civil engineer, and I was able to find a quality job and moved out there. And I was in Tucson for, I think it was like 11 years, serving with you and the other disciples there for a while. And just recently, this past August, my family and I, my wife and my two kids, we moved to Tennessee. I live in a small town outside of Chattanooga, and we moved here because I have family here. And in Arizona, we didn't have any family. The closest family we had was in Orange County, California, and then all of Rachel's family's out of the country as well. And so we thought long term, we wanted our kids to be around family. And we thought, hey, let's see if God has an opening. And, I've since advanced in my career, and I thought, like, it'll be pretty hard for me to find a job in Chattanooga because Chattanooga is a much smaller town than even Tucson is. And sure enough, there was not only a company, but like a position really close to my parents' house. I mean, it was just like God opened the door, and we were like, oh, maybe I'll start looking, and in like a year, something will open up. It was like within a week. Again, it's just like the theme with God and me, I guess. It's just this 1 week turnaround. But yeah, found a job, and we're like, all right, let's go for it. I accepted it, and we moved out here, and it's been great. Chattanooga Church is a great church. We got about 30 members, and it's been great just getting to know them, build relationships, and start to really build here in the small town I live in. Is called Ottawa. It's about 30 minutes outside of Chattanooga, so we got a Bible talk going, and yeah, we're chugging along. So I'm glad to be here.
And there's like a branch of your company right there in the town where you're living.
Yeah, like it's bizarre. The work that I do specifically, I'm a geotechnical engineer, and there's only, I think, 3 companies that do that work in all of Chattanooga. And one of them that had the job opening is around the corner from my parents' house. So I'm like, all right, I guess that's where I'm going to be.
And so how far do you live from your parents?
6-minute drive.
Oh boy, long drive.
Around the corner.
They must be just so thrilled to have your 2 beautiful kids there with them.
Oh, big time.
Okay. So you've got a really interesting courtship story. Can you tell me how you met Rachel?
Yes, very unique, but at the same time, not, because I know a lot of other couples have met this way. We met through Disciples Today, Heart and Soul. They don't call it a dating website, but more or less it's a dating website. We were able to connect on there. Well, technically, we didn't connect on that website. I signed up. There was a free trial for some of the brothers. I got a free 3-month trial. So I thought, like, I'm single. Yeah, I was like 24 at the time. And, I'll give it a shot. Being in Tucson is a smaller church. And so, had to look at outside options to find a sister to court, and went on the website, signed up. I was a little apprehensive at first. It's like long distance dating. Who wants to do that? And, what are the chances that it's going to work out? You hear a lot of horror stories of things happening with online dating. And obviously praise the website. Like they do a great job of like background checks and, making sure you're vetted, and, there's quality disciples on
Right.
the website. But yeah, so I was able to see her profile, but her subscription had expired. I guess she had a membership at some point, but it had expired. And so, but I was able to see her profile and think like, wow, this seems like a really interesting sister. And it was Rachel, and she's from the Philippines. Well, she was from the Philippines originally. She was living in Singapore at the time. And so I was like, I got to find out about this sister. She seems pretty awesome. And so I just looked her up on Facebook, and then kind of like, not Facebook stalked her, but just like messaged her directly and just said, hey, I saw your profile on DTHS. Want to see if you'd like to be friends. And it kind of just started from there. We started, chatting. We got to, video chat, and, just building from there. The first time when I went out to visit her was during the Singapore ILC. I think that was 2014 or 13. Can't remember exactly, but that was the first time I went out to see her, and we started dating at that time, and things were progressing really well. You continued to converse with like her friends and some of the leaders over there. Being long distance, like you got to kind of ask questions from other people and get as many angles as you can when you're not there. And so, everything just went so smoothly. We fell in love online, in person. Everything was just working out so well. And then 6 months after that conference, I went out there again to propose, and she said yes gracefully. And we've been, together ever since. So
you have 2 kids?
Yeah, Joshua, who's 6, and Julia, who's 4. And so they're both homeschooled. Joshua's in 1st grade, and Julia's pre-K.
Oh, that's great. I just miss those kids so much. They're so beautiful. Absolutely. That's great. I just remember when you guys were dating, you and Rachel, and Matt, you hadn't played guitar before, but the muse hit you, and you learned how to play a song, and you learned Tagalog. You learned a popular Tagalog love song. And I remember you did a video for her singing overlooking the city of Tucson, and you're playing the guitar and singing. You made like a music video for her. It was one of the most romantic, crazy, wacky things I'd ever seen done for love. And, you're up there in my Hall of Fame for just all out love. I mean, your heart was on display. I was so inspired by that. But
yeah, like I was really proud of it. And I look back at it now, and it is funny, but it got way more laughs than I was hoping for, the first go around. But
exactly,
let's put it that way.
You wanted people to take it at face value and seriously.
But I look back at it, and it's pretty hilarious.
It's so great. I just go, man. It's just you're an engineer by trade and by training, and to see you to do that, it was just very inspiring for me. Okay. Your interest in money started early, and I remember you telling me about an incident with your mom. And you risked your money on something, and when you lost it, you wanted it back. Can you share that story? I just remember fragments of it, but I remember it was so interesting when you shared that story.
Yeah, I still remember it vividly, like the emotion, like what happened. So we were I was about her and a couple of my mom's friends, and my mom asked me, I had $1 in my wallet. I forget how I earned it, but somehow I had $1 in my wallet. And she said, do you want to play the lottery? It's like a Keno type game where every couple of minutes they draw the numbers, and you could win some money. I said, okay, sure. And I selected my numbers, turned it in, and the numbers come out, and I ended up losing. And my mom's like, oh, sorry, you lost. And I said, okay, where's my $1? She's like, well, no, you bet it away. I'm like, no, but I know I lost, but like, I want my $1 back. Where's my $1? I was like so dumbfounded that like I could just give my money away. It was like for something so meaningless and pointless, like to play a game. And so that was one of the big like cornerstone moments of building my financial philosophy, I guess you could say, in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's really one of the reasons why I want to talk to you. I really respect your financial philosophy, and I'm interested in talking to you today because of all the financial upheaval that's going on right now. Right now, it is the 10th of April. Tariffs gone into effect. The market is tanked. Then it rebounded a couple yesterday, and tariffs on everybody, and lots of upheaval, threat of inflation, and kind of craziness in the market. But even without that, I wanted to talk to you about that. What is your philosophy about money and saving?
Yeah, I think it all starts, I mean, it's a biblical perspective, but with a low time preference. I think it's got to start there. I remember a lesson that you gave, Rob, a number of years ago, where you had like a penny taped to a string that was incredibly long. And I still have that penny. I should have brought it out, but I still have it. It's in my closet to remind me of the message that you gave that day, which was we need to think eternally, right? Like our life is the width of that penny on earth, but our life in heaven is forever. And so there's like no way to compare, those two lives. And so I think it starts with there, that I don't live for this world. I don't live for the short-term desires, but we have an eternal home to look forward to. And so like money and possessions and, fulfilling my desires that I want now aren't as important to me. And I think as disciples, they're not as important to us as fulfilling God's mission and working for his kingdom. So I think it's all got to start there. And at least that's where it starts for me. And then beyond that, I think it just comes down to like diligence. Like scriptures talk about, the plans of the diligent lead to profit. You got to budget, and
Right.
you got to master your money. You got to be in control of the master's money ultimately, because we are stewards of God's money. And so we need to take care of it in the way that God would want us to take care of it and to look after it.
Right. I remember you and another member were just kind of competing for who can have the lowest cost of living in Tucson. Your car was just an old beater Toyota Corolla. I don't think it had air conditioning. Maybe it did, but was it you? Maybe both of you guys didn't have air conditioning in your car.
Yeah, his car didn't have it. My car had it, but it didn't work. And man, I was like so proud. It was a 90. I think it was an old Corolla. It was either 89 or 91. I can't remember, but I was this close to getting 300,000 miles on it until we got rear-ended in it and got totaled. But that was a sad day.
But it was emblematic of your your life choices, because Tucson gets so hot. I mean, it's in Fahrenheit, it will get up into 110s, 115. It'll peak out, not usually around 107 during the summer. And there you were just driving around in that heat, no problem. Crazy. Okay, you once said that you'd like to save until you could do missionary work self-supporting. And I think you mentioned that. Is that still a goal? Is that something that's on your mind?
Yeah, it's definitely something that's on my mind. I think about it a lot. But one thing that I've really tried to focus on recently, because I think when I initially made that goal, the main goal was the financial freedom. I'll be honest. Like the main goal was I want to achieve, financial freedom. I want to retire early. I want to be able to, live life on my terms, which, on some levels are good, but at the sake of like postponing God's work, that's when it is not okay. And so I've really been rethinking that lately of, okay, if and when that ever does happen, the financial freedom, like, am I prepared to do God's work, to be on a mission field? And so I got to ask myself the question, am I doing the work now? Despite not having the flexibility or that freedom financially to do it. And so that's something I've been really considering and working on recently in my walk, to make sure that I'm doing the work. I'm being a missionary right where I'm planted.
Okay, so at that time, you really got into real estate. You were doing real estate when you first came to Tucson, and you were able to buy a house. And I think you were involved in a real estate syndicate, but then it seems like something changed. Can you talk a little bit about your strategies for achieving that financial independence and how it's changed over the years?
Yeah, so I think it was around 2016, 2017. I was getting into real estate. I was studying up on that. I was involved in a community that was, doing the same thing, and we pooled together some funds, and we created a business. There's about 5 of us that came together and pooled our money together and bought real estate, and it was doing well for the few years that we had it. Unfortunately, one of the managing members passed away, And so we decided to just dissolve the company and kind of take our profits and go. By the time that happened, I was well on my Bitcoin journey, so to speak, and so I was transitioning investments into Bitcoin. But at that time, I was definitely seeing real estate as a great way to earn and grow my wealth over time. Having now studied Bitcoin, I have a very different opinion and view of that.
Okay, so what got you interested initially in Bitcoin, and how'd you get into Bitcoin? I didn't catch it initially because I thought, oh, I had you kind of painted in the corner like, okay, Matt's really into real estate. But then I remember not too long ago that I was talking to my son James, and he's saying, "Oh yeah, Matt's really into Bitcoin." I'm like, "What?" And so, kind of caught on a little bit late. How'd you get into it? What was it that attracted you?
Yeah, so initially I didn't come upon Bitcoin right away. I came upon other alternative cryptocurrencies. I'm sure you've heard of them, like the Ethereums, the Cardanos, XRPs, and so forth. I was looking for outside returns. I was looking for ways to make money. And this is around 2021 when I was kind of digging into these different cryptocurrencies and finding out like, oh, wow, in 2017, some of these things like 10x'd in a matter of a year or something like that. And I was like, okay, well, let's dig into this a little bit more and see what I can do with it. And I, studied it a little bit. I invested some money at that time. This is again 2021. They grew, and with that grew my thirst for knowledge and continued to study it. And I came upon Bitcoin and started studying that as well. And over the time, after studying Bitcoin, I came to the conclusion that I don't anymore invest in other cryptocurrencies. I separate Bitcoin from every other cryptocurrency out there. They're very different in the way are mined and the way that the network works and the system altogether. But yeah, then I transitioned into Bitcoin completely.
Okay.
From cryptocurrencies.
Okay, so you got interested into it. I remember during that time, GameStop was really big, and you have kind of a funny story about that. GameStop was, they made a movie about it and about its just meteoric rise. Can you share a little bit about that story?
Yeah, and I will purposely never watch that movie. And I'll explain why. So I forget the year when it took place, but the general timeline is I was into GameStop well before the craze, like well before the short squeeze and Hello Kitty and that whole like storyline came about. And I bought at a great price. I had put a couple $1,000 into it or something like that, and it 3x'd within a year. And I thought, wow, like this is a phenomenal return. I better get out, and collect these gains. And a couple of months later, I remember Felipe was living at my house at the. I came home. It skyrocketed to like $300 at that time. I
okay,
bought it
one
like
second.
$3.
I blanked out there. 1 second. Can you share a little bit about a GameStop?
Yeah. So GameStop. I got into GameStop well before the craze. You're familiar with the big short squeeze and how it just skyrocketed within a matter of days. And I got in well before that. I bought in it was just a couple of dollars, and I put in a couple $1,000 and thought, okay, we'll see where this goes. And within a year, the price had tripled. And I was like, wow, this is the best return I've ever gotten. I'm beating like all of Wall Street, and I just picked this one random stock, and I felt so proud of myself. And, I walked away, threw my gains in the bank, and just like patted myself on the back, just like so proud of myself. And it was like a couple months later when the short squeeze took place. I remember vividly like reading the news and seeing what happened, how the price had like skyrocketed to $300. Felipe, your son-in-law, was living at my house at the time, and I remember coming home and talking to him about it, and I was just so depressed. I was so sad. I could have paid off my house. Like, it would have been phenomenal. And so when it comes to that GameStop movie, I'll never watch that movie because any like news about GameStop, I just get so hurt by the fact that I missed out on such an opportunity. But nobody could have seen
But
that coming.
you invested in it. You made a really good return, but then you pulled out right before the massive upturn.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Things are relative, aren't they? You know, you can do great, but then when you compare it to something, oh boy.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Now, for a person who's risk averse, it doesn't seem an obvious choice that you'd be interested in something like Bitcoin. There's a lot of turbulence in that market. There's a lot of ups and downs. What is it about it that attracts you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think I'm not a financial guru.
Sure.
By any means, like, I'm not a financial advisor.
Right. That's
Like,
right.
I'm just a guy that reads books and interprets it for my own benefit, if you will. Risk and volatility are two different things. Bitcoin is volatile. It is very volatile. As a matter of fact, it's actually getting less. I know it's pretty crazy, but it's less volatile than it was in its infancy in 2009, the early years. But on the risk side, I actually view it as low risk compared to just about anything else available in the market. When you study out Bitcoin, when you understand Bitcoin, that it's not just a financial asset, you'll understand why it's a low risk and why it's important to own. Like the US dollar, for example, everybody's speculating on what's the Fed going to do. Where are interest rates going to go? Are they going to print more money? How is that going to affect markets, tariffs, all these things? That affects the dollar. And we have no control over that. There's a board of directors from the Fed, behind closed doors that decides what goes on with the US dollar. We have no say in that. Real estate, there's risk. Your tenants can, ruin the place. The local municipality can hike up taxes. They can change laws and make them more tenant friendly, not so landlord friendly. Stocks, CEO can get caught drinking and driving and the stock plummet. I mean, there's all these outside risks that equities, real estate, these different investments have that Bitcoin just doesn't have. There is no CEO to Bitcoin. It's an immutable, which means unchangeable ledger that's coordinated through a variety of nodes across the world that keep the Bitcoin protocol going and the miners that mine the Bitcoin. And so it's something that can't be changed. There's low risk in that sense. Now, is it volatile? Yes, the price will go up and down. It's like I don't know if you've seen, there's a meme that talks about the Bitcoin price, how it's crashed so many times, how it was once 30 cents and then it crashed to 6 cents. And then Bitcoin was $7 and then it crashed to $1. And then Bitcoin was $300 and then it crashed to $100. And then Bitcoin was $19,000 and then it crashed to $7,000. And then Bitcoin was $69,000 and then it crashed to $16,000. And then Bitcoin was $109,000 and then it crashed to $77,000. And so the joke is like, yeah, it crashes, but it just continues to rise. With adoption and when people understand that it's the hardest money out there, it can't be debased. There will never be more than 21 million. It's decentralized. It's verifiable. I mean, take the gold. Weren't they going to do a gold audit on the Fed?
On Fort Knox, that's right.
And I haven't seen or heard anything of that. But even if I did, I'm not sure how much of that I would believe. But right now, I can go online and I can audit Bitcoin live. You can't hide it. It's there all on the blockchain. And so, in my opinion, Bitcoin is just the superior asset, the lowest risk asset out there, better than the faith of the United States government.
Okay, so that's really interesting. Recently, a brother in our church named Kip Schroeder lent me a book called The Bitcoin Standard, and I plowed through that. That was really interesting. And then I've been reading another book called understanding Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies or something like that. So that was less interesting, but also, very informative. Just want to figure out, okay, how does this work? It's very interesting. Now, when you approach Bitcoin, are you looking at it as a currency, as an asset that's appreciating, or are you using it as simply a savings vehicle, an inflation hedge? Like when you look at it, what's your primary viewpoint of Bitcoin?
Yeah, my primary viewpoint is of a store of value, a savings account. I don't see it as an investment. I don't use it as a currency per se. However, I know that there's other countries, maybe even our brothers and sisters around the world, that may prioritize it and use it as a currency because of the situation that they're in. But for me and where I'm at, a store of value is its greatest use case for me.
Well, that was what was so interesting about the book. It just talked about how it's very popular in countries, especially where the currency is inflated or facing hyperinflation. And I thought, well, that makes a whole bunch of sense. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think as Americans, I mean, we possess the world reserve currency. We have the U.S. dollar, and so our currency debases the slowest, right? Because everybody else's currency is pegged to the dollar. And so whether it's like Zimbabwe or Turkey or Argentina, these places that have very high inflation, I mean, hyperinflation, their currency is getting devalued ridiculously fast. And so it's very important for them to be able to have some store of value that they can hold to. I mean, in here in America, we think like, oh, the Fed's just keeping us at 2%, like we're okay. We'll just, plug that into our equation and make sure that we earn more than that to keep up with inflation. But I don't necessarily believe that 2.4% or whatever they just came out with, because inflation is not the raise in prices. I know a lot of people think that that's what it is. Oh, it's the price of goods is inflating. That's inflation. Well, that's a symptom of inflation. And what inflation is they're inflating the currency. They're printing U.S. dollars. I believe in the last 5 years, the term I've heard is they've printed 40% of the currency within the last 5 years, during the whole COVID stimulus and everything. I mean, that right off the bat, that devalue. I mean, say you're getting close to retirement and you're sitting on a great nest egg to be able to walk away from your job, and then the government just decides to print 40% of the currency. Like, what does that do to your savings? Now, in nominal terms, your number is still the number and it's still rising, 5 to 10% a year. But in real value, you're losing. Mm-hmm. You're losing a lot.
Right.
And what's the worst part about it is the Fed knows what they're doing. These people know they're stealing from you. And that's what, I mean, I get angry when I think about it. Like, the fiat currency is theft.
Right. In the book, he talks a lot about that. And he talks about how pretty much every country now is on a fiat currency. And after 1914, after the beginning of World War I, when Britain went off the gold standard with the pound, and then other countries followed suit, and essentially it's fiat. It's just by order. Basically say, hey, this is worth this amount, just believe us, and that's our only currency that you can use within our country. So it's not pegged to an underlying asset. And that was really eye-opening for me because I'd never really understood the concept of the gold standard. And he, in his book, which I thought was interesting, he said, what I thought was interesting was he said the rise in warfare has increased with countries' ability to freely finance wars by simply printing more money. And in the past, when they were pegged to a gold standard, and this is basically saying that if you have $1 bill, that's equal to $1 amount of gold, and you can exchange it at any point in time. When they left that and just cut off that back in the day, if a country couldn't raise the money to sustain a battle, they would just quit. I mean, they couldn't keep the fight going. But World War I and World War II were so long and sustained because of the ability to finance. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's just really sad. And you got to think like that's the currency that I use. That's the country that I support. And I choose to exit that system. I choose to use free money, free market money. I choose to use a money that I think God would favor, honestly. I mean, there's a scripture that talks about how God detests dishonest measures, weights and measures. And that's exactly what the US dollar is. And I'm just trying to avoid it as much as I can.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Have you completely abandoned other investment vehicles, other investment tools, real estate, company stocks?
Not completely. No. Not completely. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. So you're still looking at other opportunities, but Bitcoin is your primary vehicle. Okay. Now, why do you consider Bitcoin superior to other cryptocurrencies? There's Ethereum, there's others. I've got my own thoughts on this, but for the layman, why do you consider it head and shoulders above others?
Yeah. So I understand that there's other cryptocurrencies. They do, I guess, have a purpose or some utility, like they can be used for applications. What I like very strongly disagree with them on is how they were formed and the fact that they have like financial value that can be manipulated. So with every other cryptocurrency, there is a board, there are insiders that were, they call it like a pre-mine, that they were distributed tokens or coins prior to the initial coin offering, the ICO, once it's open to be sold to the public. And that's what you see with a lot of these pump and dumps. I'm sure you've seen in the news in the past few months or past couple of years, like the FTX scandal and things like that. Terra Luna, they pump up the price and then they sell on retail and they go away happy with all the gains, and you're left holding these worthless bags, all for the cause of being able to do this and being able to do that, and this one trick pony is going to help with this financial sector, or it's going to be able to do this, where a lot of the applications that they're building, again, I'm not a computer science whiz. I chose civil engineering because it's physical, it's practical, it's tangible. The whole computer science, I am learning about this stuff, but Bitcoin can do a lot of it. If we can just get developers and people to develop on Bitcoin, I think it will be really good for that ecosystem. But like I said, I mean, there are applications to be used for, but it's unfortunate that it's just filled with a lot of scammers.
It seems like it. And it seems like if the original founders can go back and modify the system, it really defeats the purpose of the system of being kind of unable to be modified, immutable and unchangeable. And it seems like ever since Satoshi Nakamoto kind of got the ball rolling and just kind of disappeared, it's just this kind of inanimate but unmovable opportunity for people. Very, very interesting, very unique in a way. Now, let's go back to volatility. Some people are saying, in the book, it talked about how as the price rises, volatility should go down because it'll start acting much more like a currency, which doesn't have, like the dollar doesn't have a lot of day-to-day rapid fluctuation in value. Like if you know that you can buy a computer for $300 today, you can probably buy it for $300 tomorrow. You can pretty much count on it. But with Bitcoin, you don't know what's going to, recently it shot up over 100,000, then it's back down to, $70,000. But what is your view in terms of volatility? Because many people have been investing in it simply because of that rapid appreciation. Do you see that going away?
Not for a while. Like the number of people in the world that have say $1,000 of Bitcoin, it's like less than 0.1% of the world population. And so it's still like extremely early. Like you've seen the adoption curve of different technologies. we're still in like the very early adoption phase of Bitcoin. And so it's going to be volatile for a while until I don't see it becoming not volatile until it could be potentially a currency used by nation states, like it is in El Salvador anyway. But I see that going to take some time. And the volatility is due simply to human emotion. The fact that it was 109,000 a month or two ago, and now it's 77 or whatever it is today, is purely due to that, because the Bitcoin network has not changed. Another meme in Bitcoin is one Bitcoin is equal to one Bitcoin, and it's TikTok next block. Every 10 minutes, approximately, a block is mined, and nothing has changed within the past few weeks. Now, obviously, from a macroeconomic standpoint, like the tariffs and trade and interest rates, all this stuff is in flux right now, but Bitcoin is still chugging along, and we can predict what's going to happen to Bitcoin in 4 years from now and how much is going to be mined, and in 8 years from now we can predict how much is going to be mined. It's just like a clock, and so it's set. It's going to be going regardless of what happens on the outside.
I thought that was one of the most intriguing aspects. As I studied more about it, I thought this is really intriguing, because if it does achieve wider adoption, I mean, if it becomes like a global currency, like, let's say the British sterling pound back in late 1800s, something like that, then it would be a game changer. I mean, who knows how much it would be valued at that point. I mean, it would have to be, each one would be multi-millions. I can't imagine. So it's very interesting to me, thinking, okay, the upside potential seems very, very unlimited in a way, because it still has, even though I'm definitely a late adopter, just kind of getting interested at this point, it seems really interesting that there's a lot of room for growth, for adoption. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I will say, though, you're still extremely early. I know it feels like you're late because it's not 2016 and Bitcoin's not 33 cents and it's like, 80,000, and you seem like, oh, I missed the boat on Bitcoin. Try not to think like that. You're still extremely early. Like you said, I mean, say Bitcoin goes to $1 million, like 77,000. I mean, you're paying literally pennies on the dollar right now. It is extremely early.
Mm-hmm.
Have that perspective.
Well, I think there's a lot of people who, it's made me think a lot about the instability in the financial system. And I go, okay, the US dollar and all just the turbulence that we're facing right now. What's your view as you look at kind of just what's happening in the world right now? What's that make you think about what's around the bend? What's a possibility? I'm not asking you to check your crystal ball, but what's been running through your mind over the past month or two?
Okay, to be honest, I don't think about it too much. It doesn't affect me, which is great, right? Especially from like a spiritual perspective. Like, I'm able to focus on my relationship with God, my family, where that's going, how that's going, and money. It's the whole like set it and forget it, because I understand what Bitcoin is. I have a faith of where it's going to go. I don't worry. And the past 2 months have been incredibly, they'll say bullish, like good news financially for Bitcoin, with the new administration that's come in that's very pro Bitcoin. They established a strategic reserve. They're trying to find ways to acquire Bitcoin. I mean, we're talking about the United States government. It doesn't get any bigger than that. And so these little like ups and downs in the market, the tariffs or what's going to happen, the stock market crash, like none of that phases me. None of that bothers me. I don't even check the Bitcoin price anymore. I used to check it when I first got in. It was like every 5 minutes. Like, I'm checking the price. Like, what is Ethereum at now? At this point, it just does not faze me, and it's such a great place to be in. And I believe it's great because it just makes my relationship with God that much better and easier, because I'm not worried about those things. Now, do I still have to work a job and provide for my family? I'm the sole income earner, and we don't have a lot because I'm the sole income earner. So like we're barely saving as it is. We're just making ends meet. So they're there. But from a long-term perspective, there's not fear, there's not worry, there's hope and conviction.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, you're like the millionaire next door in the book written by Thomas Stanley back in the 90s. One of my favorite books ever, and he talks about how when you think about a millionaire, they're probably not the stereotype you're thinking of, wearing gold chains and driving around in a Lambo. And instead, they're probably the person living next door to you that you wouldn't realize driving a 97 Corolla with no air conditioning. You definitely fit that profile. Let's just kind of put some legs on this. For a person, what advice would you give to ministers and disciples who are thinking, you know what, I better start building a strategy? Okay. We don't talk a lot about it. I certainly don't talk a lot about this on my show much, but it's been, thinking about it. I'm getting a little bit older. Definitely retirement is on the horizon for sure. What advice would you give? And you, of course, I am not putting any responsibility on you. You're just a disciple and a friend whom I respect, to ministers and disciples who'd like to build a solid financial base for their lives.
Yeah, I think, you brought up the inflation topic earlier. Inflation is affecting our churches big time. It's sad. It's hard. It's reality, unfortunately. And what can we do as church leaders, as board members, as disciples in the church when prices are going up? And for the church, like, how can we combat that? It's either through increasing tithes and offerings. Hopefully, people are still giving sacrificially and helping, God's mission. Or we can reduce expenses. Maybe that means cutting staff. Maybe that means not having certain resources for outreach. Or maybe that means just reducing the quality of the services that we have. And asking members to give more when they're experiencing that same inflation in their lives it's a lose-lose scenario. And so, I mean, even experiencing it a little bit in Tucson, as well as it's a challenge to maintain that balance of financial responsibility amongst the trials. And so, having studied out Bitcoin myself, and like I said, I'm still learning. There's a lot for me to learn. I would encourage people to start there. Start with the Bitcoin Standard. It's a great book. There's other great books, especially there's even like there's so many Bitcoin books out there nowadays. There's even like spiritual Bitcoin books or Bible-backed Bitcoin books. One I've read is called Thank God for Bitcoin. There's others called The Gospel According to Bitcoin and so forth. There's a lot of different podcasts and other people out there putting out content on Bitcoin. I don't encourage people to buy Bitcoin, because what happens when Bitcoin goes up 20%, you're like, all right, great, I made some money, I'll sell. Or Bitcoin just went down 30%, like, let me get out of this thing. I encourage people to study Bitcoin. It's not until you have the conviction of what the problem is and what the solution of Bitcoin is, then you'll hold, and you'll have that same mentality of, what goes on the outside doesn't affect me. I'm going to hold regardless. So I really encourage board members, I really encourage church leaders to look into Bitcoin. And I know I'm not the authority on this topic, and I'm just little old me, consider myself a pleb in the Bitcoin community. And I just really encourage them. And there's a lot smarter people than me that can run circles around me. I really encourage them to take a look at Bitcoin. It's really impressive, even just talking to you about it, Rob, because I remember having this conversation maybe a year and a half ago about Bitcoin. And I was really impressed. Like, when I asked you, Rob, can I give in Bitcoin? You were like open to it. You didn't say, oh, like, no, let's not do that. You're like, yeah, let's give it a try. And just the fact that you were like open to it, I knew like the other times I had talked to you about Bitcoin, you kind of just like listen and just, okay, took it in. And even just talking to you now, it's pretty clear that you have a deeper understanding of it. You've looked into it. You've read books on it. You're seeking more knowledge on it. That's what I encourage and call all disciples, all ministers, all church boards to do is to take a look at it.
How do you think it could benefit the church? Just the universal church.
Yeah, well, I think first it can just help individuals. Kind of just speaking from the United States perspective, times are challenging, and I'm sure there's a lot of people going through challenging times right now, and probably even going to be more challenging as times move forward. I really encourage them to study out Bitcoin, to learn it, to have a conviction on it, and to begin investing in it and see like what it could do for their lives. And look at the problem. I mean, the problem is the inflation. The problem is the theft, and to remove yourself from it.
Yeah, it's definitely, I'm really interested because, seeing what's happened like in Argentina. Okay, Argentina was hyperinflation, and the president there, although he's very controversial, has been able to get inflation back down to like 2% per month, which is just, it was at 25% a month. And I mean, it's just a massive, massive issue. And I think it could be one that's far greater. And I think especially with the tariffs, it's definitely caught my eyes like, okay, we could have massive inflation, and who knows what can happen. Anything could happen. We can't see the future. There's a black swan that we're facing here in the future. And so it's definitely something I better start paying attention to this. I think this is really important. How would a person get involved with Bitcoin? Let's say you first saying you got to study it. I totally agree. I think that's 100%. But how would a person get involved with Bitcoin if they wanted to? There's a lot of different ways. How would they get into it with wisdom? Not just like, oh, I'm just going to go down and just blow all my money on Bitcoin and then lose it, and then just be mad at
Yeah, that's why I really emphasize, like, I try not to encourage people to buy Bitcoin directly. I mean, there are better ways to buy it, certain websites to use and not use and things like that. The good ones like Swan or River, I like those because they're Bitcoin only. They don't sell other cryptocurrencies. But you just kind of harping on the point again and again, but to study it out, because that's where you're going to build the conviction. That's where you're going to learn about it. You're going to learn that it's more than just a financial asset. Like what's behind it? It's real world energy. It's a real cost to make Bitcoin, unlike the US dollar or some of these other cryptocurrencies that are just printed out of thin air. Actual real world energy is used to mine Bitcoin. Beyond that, there's Bitcoin podcasts all over. You can go to YouTube or Spotify or Apple, and the Bitcoin podcast is a great one that I listen to pretty regularly. You can listen to anything on Michael Saylor. If you're familiar with Michael Saylor, he was the former CEO of MicroStrategy. He just now simply serves on the board as kind of their Bitcoin spokesperson and strategist. But he has taken his company, which is kind of a small time, a couple $100 million a year revenue. I mean, small in terms of like Microsoft and Google and stuff like that. But he's taken his company and made it a strictly Bitcoin company because he's discovered, he wrote the foreword of the Bitcoin standard, and he's taken his company and made it pretty much exclusively a Bitcoin company. And he encourages the same thing for individuals. He encourages the same thing for families, for churches, for businesses, for countries. He encourages everybody to adopt that Bitcoin standard in their life because of its immutable, decentralized, hard cap money.
Right. It just has a lot of attractive features. Now, I'm not invested in Bitcoin. I'm just got to say that up front. I'm in the study period. I'm in the, I want to read about it. I want to learn more about it. But I think it is interesting. I like the fact that it's immutable. The system can't be changed. It's peer to peer. There's no central bank involved. And that's really good. It's universal, something that you can send money around the world, which is really nice. And now it's got at least a almost 15-year track record, which is really, really powerful. And others have tried and just seem like knockoffs, but they've got inherent weaknesses. And I think Bitcoin has shown me quite a bit. Are you considering mining Bitcoin yourself. I mean, it was interesting to me to read about proof of work and how, blocks record the ledger and in blocks and how you can get fees for that. And I thought, I wonder if Matt's doing that. I wonder if he's mining Bitcoin. You get paid in Bitcoin for the energy that you're poured into it. Are you doing that, or have you considered doing that?
I am not doing it. I have considered it. I've ran a node, and that was pretty cool. That's another simple way to get involved in Bitcoin. Running a node is just you're the one verifying the transaction. So the miner, for those who aren't familiar, the miner is expensing the energy to find the nonce to be able to earn that block reward. And typically miners don't stand alone. You kind of like join a team, and if somebody on your team gets the block reward, you kind of all share it. And so that's the mining side, a very high level view of it. And then the node is they're the ones actually verifying that this transaction, that this account has this Bitcoin and this address is ready to receive it. And they're sending, this amount of Bitcoin to this address, and they make sure it meets the rules of Bitcoin. And it's, again, like decentralized. So like I said, there's tens of thousands of nodes around the world. And I've been a part of that. And that's a great way to kind of dive deeper. That's like next level,
right,
to getting into Bitcoin. But that's a great way to get involved.
Very, very interesting. Well, hopefully, Matt, we can do a follow-up talk. As I learn a little bit more and I have more questions, maybe we can talk next time about, making that next step to get more involved. Any final comments that you'd like to make at this point? So what I hear you saying is step one and stay on step one until you feel confident is learn about it, study it, research it. Don't dive into it blind. Make sure you understand what you're doing. Don't allow greed to just take over.
Yeah.
Any final comments about Bitcoin in particular, or about this discussion?
No, I mean, just kind of what I said. There's great forums on X, on Twitter. There's meetups probably near you. I was able to find a nice meetup here in Chattanooga. I see them like once a month and kind of discuss what's going on in Bitcoin and learn, because there's more people far more advanced, again, like I said, than I am that I can learn from. And it'd be great if wherever you guys, your listeners are, that potentially they can find something like that. And if not, feel free to email me if they want to reach out and they have questions, and I can either point them in the right way or maybe help them in their Bitcoin journey as well. I'd be more than happy to do that.
That's great. Can you give your email, Matt? And
yes,
I'll also include it in the show notes as well.
Great. I still use my Tucson Church of Christ email, so that's Matt, MATT, at TucsonChurchofChrist.org. Matt at TucsonChurchofChrist.org.
Okay, terrific. Going back to what advice would you give to a person who wants to make this life count?
Yeah. And I think like from today's topic, I kind of want to like answer that with one, you got to have the eternal perspective. I think that's the most important, right? Because God's the one that measures. He's the one that's counting our life of like, what did we do? When we get to heaven and he looks back at our life, it's like, okay, this is where we're really held account for our life. And so I think having that eternal perspective of like, okay, well, what is God calling me to do? Because that's going to be what counts. And so really focusing on that eternal perspective. And then the other side of that is doing the work. And like I said, that's one thing that I've been learning and trying to implement a lot more recently, especially coming to Tennessee. Like it's a transition period in my life. I get to look back and reflect like, okay, yeah, I spent those 9 years in Orange County as a disciple. Then I spent 11 years in Tucson. Like, what went well? Like what were the challenging times I went through? How did they go? And what do I foresee here in Tennessee in the next kind of step and stage of my life? And I think through the good time, like I've had times where our Bible talk is just cranking, we're baptizing, we're studying, people are, overcoming sin. It's just like totally fruitful. And then other times when it's like discouraging, times are challenging, friendships, relationships are broken, it's just hard. It's really tough.
Yeah.
And I look back and I think like I see the times that I continued to do the will of God, read, pray, serve other people, fellowship, evangelize, like doing the small things, like just continually serving God, because we don't know when or how, if God is going to bless that. And so I think to not let go of that, because sometimes we wait for like the big opportunity. We wait for Goliath to like be standing in front of us, like, oh yeah, now's my chance to win big, and here's where my life counts, as opposed to like the day in and day out grind of being a disciple sometimes. And so I really encourage that to study, to read, to pray, to fellowship, reach out, like do the work of an evangelist, like the scriptures talk about.
That's awesome. That's one thing that really I appreciate about you, Matt, is you have your head on straight. You don't allow greed to dominate your thinking. You are really mastering money rather than being mastered by it. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, and especially about this subject, which can, lead in all sorts of directions. And I appreciate your comments tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks for listening. Here's how you can help support the program. First, let your friends know about the podcast. Secondly, read and review one of my books, either How to Plant and Grow a Church or Courage, How to Make This Life Count. You can find both of them on Amazon.com. Or you can support the program with a gift today. The link is in the show notes, because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day, and make this life count.